Hey guys, I'm Jordan Daw. Welcome to the Sports Addict. I've been playing fantasy football for a few years. I started on a Yahoo League. That was the first one I was in. NFL.com is where I play my fantasy football with my buddies. I'm an avid sports fan. As you can see, Leafs, Raiders, Blue Jays, Raptors, Irish. I mainly follow hockey, baseball, and football, NFL, and NCAA. I'm not a big CFL fan, sorry guys. As you can see, I'm a Raiders fan. It's been tough the last 12 years, but I think we're starting to turn it around. I will be touching on baseball, hockey, and football mainly. But I thought it would be good to start with fantasy football. I wanted to give it some tips, some strategies, some different tricks that you guys can use to help win your league. So how to draft? You start off, number one, with the draft. Obviously you can listen to guys like Michael Fabiano or Adam Rank and you're probably saying, well, who's Jordan Daw? What are his credentials? I mean, I have no credentials as far as whatever. I'm just an avid fan like yourself that wants to be a GM, that wants to have fun. Some people play in money leagues, some people just play for fun. But basically, how do you draft? I personally, when I do my draft, I don't even pay attention to a quarterback in the first round or a tight end. I mean, Gronk's the only tight end you're going to take in the first round. Aaron Rodgers. Last year would have been Luck and Rodgers. This year I'd say it'd be Rodgers, even though Andy Dalton is surprising right now. But unless you have the 9th or 10th pick in the first round, I wouldn't be taking a guy like Rodgers or Gronk in the first round. I'd be taking running back galore. Running backs, I think, are the most important position, should be taken in the first round. After the first round, if there's another stud running back that for whatever reason, a couple quarterbacks or Gronk or whatever have been drafted in that first round, or maybe a couple top tier wide receivers like say a Dez Bryant or a Calvin Johnson, or you should take another running back. Usually what I would do, because most times, as we know, running backs fly off the board. So first round, running back. Second round, probably you're not going to have another studded running back. But if you're mid to late in the second round, maybe you're going to want to take a top-end wide receiver. You want to make sure you stock up on as many running backs and wide receivers. For some people that are more seasoned in fantasy football, this is already known. For people that are new to it, this is good information for you. So usually I go running back, wide receiver, running back, and then wide receiver. And then from there on out, in the 5th, 6th round, it's whatever best value running back and wide receiver is there. When you're drafting too, something to think about is rookies. Only go with rookie running backs mid to late in the draft. Don't go with them early because, I mean, look at a guy like Melvin Gordon. Not turning out so hot right now. I actually traded for him in one of my leagues because I drafted Alfred Morris later on in the draft, and I mean, Washington's always like, I don't know, they just totally mess up the fantasy world with the running backs, kind of like New England, where Belichick's always throwing things around. Running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, best value running back, wide receiver again, and then that's generally when I look at what are the top maybe 3 tight ends following Gronk, which I mean, it's really a toss-up every year. I mean, right now Barnidge is blowing it up, but I mean, no one would have thought of Barnidge would be like a Jimmy Graham or like a Greg Olsen, something like that. After that, tight end, quarterback, and to be honest, I sometimes won't even draft a kicker or a defense. I'll pick up the best available after my 15 picks. So don't fall into the rookie trap. The last 2 years, wide receivers, rookie wide receivers, have been like the best that we've ever seen in the draft. These guys have been off the charts. Crazy last year was like Kelvin Benjamin, and there was Mike Evans. Sammy Watkins was pretty decent too, and I mean, these guys were blowing up. Odell Beckham, I don't want to forget him. I mean, OBJ was huge for I guess it was 12 weeks. He missed the first 4 weeks of the season with a hamstring injury. Running backs are somebody that I would take, like I said before. Wide receivers, they always come and go. They always show up in the waiver wire during the year. I'd kind of steer away from any rookies aside from running back. A trick that I have is I keep an eye during the season. Like right now, I've kept an eye since the beginning of the year, since off season, on players on physically unable to perform, the PUP list, inactive players on IA, IR, SUS, suspended players. I keep an eye on those because a guy like, say, Antonio Gates or Martavius Bryant, they just came off of suspension. One of my one really good buddy there, he stashed both of them late in the draft, and I mean, it's going to pay dividends for him now, I believe. For myself, I kept an eye on Brandon LaFell. He was on PUP the whole year, and I grabbed him. And what you want to do is when you grab these guys, you don't want to wait until they're in the news or in the waiver wire, they're in ranks 11 sleepers. You don't want to get people to know about these guys or have it come up. You want to grab them 2 weeks. That's my advice, 2 weeks in advance, because if you do it a week in advance, there's other people that maybe they're following the same players as you. They're going to try and jockey for position. Maybe they have a higher rank in the waiver wire, and they're going to try and take that guy from you, and you're going to be so disappointed with yourself that you didn't grab him when you had the chance without a fight. So like, for example, like I said, I picked up LaFell. Another guy that I'm looking at and I've been watching for a while, I mean, Tennessee, their backfield's been a disaster. I basically am keeping an eye on a guy, David Cobb. He's supposed to be back week 9. I'm going to scoop him up next week. There's a trade I'm about to make or whatever, so it just didn't work to take him this week. Otherwise I would have done it. Not saying he's gonna work out, but I mean, they were talking big things about him before he got injured. Another guy I'm keeping an eye on is Tony Romo. I mean, one of the guys in our league, he dumped Tony Romo when he found out he was going to be out until week 11, I guess they're talking about him coming back, and I believe it's against Miami. Basically, I want to have him because what if my starting quarterback, Andy Dalton, gets injured? I mean, I had Breeze, and I have Dalton. Dalton's tops in the league, but on a bye week, I mean, Romo would be great, and I guess it wouldn't really matter because Dalton's on a bye this week, so you need to have 2 good quarterbacks. I mean, Romo's no slouch, and if you wanted to keep just Dalton, you could always trade Romo for someone else that's quarterback needy and get another position of need. Making trades. If you're not trading like Adam Rank says and Michael Fabiano at NFL.com, if you're not trading, you're not trying. I mean, if you're just going to play the wire, I mean, that's good. The wire is, a lot of people live and die by that. But if you're not making trades or making, you know, like Alex Anthopoulos for the Blue Jays, I mean, he constantly just knocks on doors, asks about people. They say no, what's the worst they're going to say? No, right? So, I mean, if you're not trading, you're not trying. I'm like the Trade Shark or Trade Z or whatever they call me, different names, because I constantly am trying to be that GM that makes the deals. You gotta trade. Don't just trade and trade and trade. You're just making constant moves. But I mean, constantly, like, you can be happy with your roster and the depth that you have, but you want to constantly always look at your roster that you can tweak it and make it better. You want to beat the competition. I mean, when you're going to trade, don't just send trade proposals. Don't just do it that way. I find the best way to get someone to see it your way is to not just fire off an email for a trade proposal. What you need to do is you need to text your buddy, you call them, or when you see them, you bring up your trade idea and say, hey, I was looking at your depth chart and I was looking at mine and I could see that you needed this and I needed that. When you're on a more personal level, it makes someone want to engage more into the conversation, and then you can kind of coach them or talk them into it. I find that there's a way better success rate of making it fun and getting the deal done that you want to get done. Plan ahead for bye weeks so you don't have bye week disaster, bye week blues, because you don't want to have like 4 or 5 players on a bye and basically you just toss that whole week into the garbage. Try and make deals that get you out of, as they call it on fantasy football, bye week hell. So you want to make sure that you avoid that. Try and, if you can, add and drop or make trades to make that work. Keep an eye on your roster and other people's depth charts. Whenever I'm doing a trade, I always look at the depth charts just to best assess and evaluate their teams. Something you want to keep an eye on is when you're looking at your depth chart or your roster, you want to look to see who in weeks 14, 15, 16, whatever, towards the end of the year there, I guess it'd be weeks 12, 13, 14. You want to see who they're playing when it comes to the playoffs. And you want to make sure that if your matchups aren't that great, maybe you could look at somebody else and try and find a trade that works, that can kind of get you better position, better matchups for when the playoffs come, so you have a better chance of winning, versus having a guy that's going to get you to the playoffs, but when you get to the playoffs, he's up against top-notch, like a wide receiver up against top corners. I mean, you don't want that. It doesn't help you, and you'll end up losing. When making trades also, just a quick tip, you're going to want to look for people, like I said before, that have easier schedules and matchups, and maybe take a guy that maybe is got harder matchups, but they have put up the same amount of fantasy points, try and make a trade that way. That's also another strategy I use, because then you get the better schedule. You're going to get better fantasy points production versus somebody else who's got a harder schedule that might be the same value as somebody else, but his schedule just doesn't allow him to get the fantasy points that somebody else does. Selling high, buying low in trades. You want to try and sell high. If you don't feel like a player is going to be able to continue looking at his schedule, he's got hard matchups, you don't think he's going to be able to do it for the long haul, try and sell high and buy low on players that you know generally tend to struggle early. Maybe someone else doesn't know that, and then they turn it on. Try and make trades in that sell high, buy low. When you keep trying to deal with somebody and they just seem to want to send you back these terrible deals where they're trying to get the best end on you and they're not making it fair, just stop dealing with that person, because there's always a person out there that you just can't deal with. So waiver wire pickups. When to pick up, when to hold. Why no move is best move sometimes. If you're not sold on anyone in waiver wire, wait for drops. So what am I saying here? I'm saying sometimes if you don't feel like there's somebody who's really like, you really want to go pick them up, or you don't feel like you want to drop someone to get that guy, I mean, sometimes it's better. The best move is no move, and you just sit and you wait for people to drop people that they shouldn't. As other people are making their moves for players that really weren't worth picking up, you move up the waiver rank towards the front, because they're now using their waiver wire to pick up somebody, and they're going to drop someone that you can scoop up and have first picks on. Another thing you don't want to do is you don't, in the waiver wire, want to pick up somebody for a week or two and you drop somebody who was going to be better for you long term. Don't think short term, think long term. I know these guys at the NFL Network want you to go out and pick up this guy and this guy and this guy. Don't always believe everything that they say. I mean, they're not always right. They're just trying to make a show and give you some ideas. So yeah, holding your position in the waiver wire puts you in higher waiver priority to land a dropped player. You want to keep an eye on touches and targets. Who is maybe not off to a fast start, but they're getting a ton of touches and targets every single week. Try and keep an eye on those guys. I use a watch list. I keep all the players on a watch list that I'm really focused on, and I generally will zone in on a couple positions, and I try and use that to basically monitor different players so I know before other people do. Try and get the edge on scooping up that player. Don't keep more than on your depth. I think it's really silly. Anyone that keeps more than 2 quarterbacks or 2 tight ends, they got like 3 quarterbacks, 3 tight ends, or 2 kickers, or 2 defenses. I just don't see the point. It's a waste where you could be stocking up on running back and wide receiver depth. Running backs get injured all the time and are the most important position. I mean, tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think so in this category. Stocking up on 3 quarterbacks, unless you're planning on trading someone or you have 2 tight ends that are on the same bye week, I wouldn't do it unless you're doing it for a week or you're trading someone away. So on bye weeks, if there's a kicker or like a defense that's on a bye and you don't want to drop them, don't just drop them and then pick up another kicker, because you might end up costing yourself losing a good kicker like a Gostkowski or a Crosby or a Tucker or somebody like that. You don't want to lose these guys to somebody else that costs you in the long run just because of a bye week. If you've got a spot available, try and dump the guy you don't care about the most or you don't think is going to continue to produce for you, and try and just pick up another kicker or a defense. Unless you're got a whole bunch of people on a bye that week, I mean, try and make do, I guess, and hope that someone isn't able to pick them up in priority in the waiver in the next week. Try and avoid doing it. Use the research tool at the top. There's a menu bar, and there's also at the very top the research tool when making a decision who to add on bye weeks for better matchups. I mean, you can do it of a couple weeks to make sure you have the edge, so you know what tight end is good against, what defense is bad against tight ends. So then you know that that tight end that week, if there's a bye week coming up, you can take that second tight end you have or someone off the waiver wire, slot him in, and know that he might have a better week than normal because he's against a defense that gives up top points to tight ends. You need to pay attention to weekly matchups when you're looking at your depth chart. You don't want to put a guy in, I don't care if it's Calvin Johnson. I mean, if he's going up against a top defense, if you have like 3 good number 1 wide receivers and the other 2 have phenomenal matchups, and say a Calvin Johnson doesn't, but you happen to have a AJ Green and a Des Bryant I mean, that would be pretty crazy, but you get what I'm saying. I would roll with the other two, and if you've got 3 good running backs, maybe you bench them that week. But there is the exception too, where maybe it's hard to bench someone like that and you don't want to take that gamble. I sometimes take the gamble. When dropping players, I mean, we all get frustrated with different players. Eddie Lacy, I'm sure whoever has him, oh my gosh, you're probably not too happy right now. But don't give up too early and don't hold on too long. So don't drop too early, don't hold on too long. You got to try and find some kind of a balance. Wait it out, like I waited out on Lamar Miller and he blew it up last week under a new offensive coordinator and coach and whatever. And so there's a trick to the waiver wire, how to get what you want at a higher success rate. When you're doing your priorities, say you're picking up 2-3 guys, I noticed that if there's 3 people you want to dump and there's 3 people you want to add, but you're trying to figure out how you want to do it. I always pick the guy I want the most and drop the guy I want the least. But if there's a guy ahead of you, say you're 3rd in the waiver wire, the priority list, and you think someone else is going to grab that guy, it doesn't hurt to still put that waiver in, that claim, because if it does fall to you, then you're going to land the guy. I mean, duh, yeah. But if it doesn't, you can still set up and it won't count against you, because it's only going to count a claim if you actually are successful in the claim, not rejected because somebody with a higher priority grabbed it before you. So you can put in as many priority claims as you want on the waiver wire, but you're only going to end up having X amount come through. So I could make 6 claims but only end up with 3 players, and I've done that before and gotten all 3 players that I wanted, because I did repeatedly different people add, drop, add, drop, add, drop. I don't know if you're understanding fully what I'm saying, but I mean, it's only gonna count against you when you actually successfully claim somebody. So put in as many as you want and you'll get the guys you want. Make sure you're always reading the news on the players to see if they're gonna be playing that week. I know it sounds dumb, some people don't. You need to pay attention to that. You also need to read news on the players for players on suspension, IR, IA, PUP. That way you can pick them up or drop them if you need to because they're going on IR, or they're not going to be coming back, like Jamal Charles. Someone in their league's holding him. I don't know why, because they said he's done, so I don't know if it's like a pride thing and they got to keep him on their roster, but I mean, he's done. Don't always listen to the expert picks. Go with your gut sometimes. I mean, yes, they have good information. I'm not saying don't listen to wisdom, but what I am saying is they're not always right. Another thing to do is keep an eye on the history of the adds and drops in your league. You want to see if there's a pattern of position players or a pattern that somebody does. I've noticed different patterns that different people do. You want to basically set up your priority where they're not going to get that guy before you do. You're going to get him on your first pick instead of getting him on your second pick. But obviously if there's a guy you really want, then sometimes you're going to have to take that chance and let it ride out. I wanted to drop him, but I just couldn't do it, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think it's going to pay dividends now. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the top 10 running backs in the league, but I am saying that it was smart for me to hold on to him. You just want to make sure that you don't give up too quickly, but you also don't hold too long. Because I know sometimes we hold on, and then the trade value's dead. How to best use a reserve spot. With the reserve spot, some people use it in their leagues. It's an option you can have for standard formats. I'm not sure what it is for PPR. You can keep switching people around. Like right now I have Brandon LaFell in the reserve spot. When he comes off PUP, I'm going to pick up Cobb. Then he's going to move into that reserve spot because he's on IR. When he comes off in week 9, if he does, then I'm going to pick up Romo 2 weeks in advance, and then I'm going to slide him into that spot until he's off the list. And then I can decide on my 16 who I want to drop to be back at 15 again. So it's getting the player before the other people get the player and using the reserve spot to the best advantage and stealing players away. Make sure you do not give away your strategy. I know I'm doing it right now, but I'm trying to help out the millions of people in the fantasy football world. So I mean, whatever, right? So we're out of time. I'm Jordan Daw. The Raiders. Raider fan for Sports Addict. So make sure you guys comment, subscribe, or maybe share an idea for topics for upcoming vlogs and shows.